After a decisive victory against the Byzantine army in the Battle of Bulgariffagon in 896, Bulgaria asserted its dominance on the Balkan Peninsula. Peace was signed between King Simeon I and Emperor Leo VI, granting Bulgaria territorial expansion and annual tribute to be paid by Constantinople. Minor border clashes and raids continued, but the agreement largely stabilized the frontier for more than a decade. This gave time to Leo to address other theaters. The Romans battled against the Arabs in Sicily, where the last Byzantine stronghold fell into Muslim hands. Further Arab land and naval operations followed in the southern parts of Asia Minor. Aegean islands and the Peloponnese were plundered, culminating in the conquest of the second largest and richest city in the empire, Thessaloniki, in 904. After the Arabs retreated with the spoils of war, the Bulgarians came in from the north and also plundered Thessaloniki. The previous peace between Simeon and Leo was restored, but further territories were ceded to Bulgaria. The Roman leadership realized that only a powerful fleet could protect their coast from Arab incursions. Vast sums were poured into the construction of new ships. This paid off with naval victories in the Aegean Sea in 908 and the landing in Cyprus in 910, from where the Byzantine leadership attacked the Syrian coastal region, occupying Laodicea in the process. But in 912, these advances were halted with a heavy defeat on the waves of the Mediterranean Sea, and the death of Emperor Leo VI the Wise. The future of the Eastern Roman Empire was once again uncertain. This video is sponsored by History Hit, the best resource for anyone who wants to learn about the past. Enjoy hundreds of exclusive history documentaries about events that shaped our world, over 1,000 podcast episodes and 5,000 articles on all of your devices. Best of all, with 2 new programs and 15 podcast episodes every week, it's safe to say that History Hit is the true Netflix for history. I recently watched Securing His Kingdom, William's Methods of Control, a 5-part series centered around how William the Conqueror controlled England after the Norman invasion and the defeat of Harold Godwinson in 1066, following a story of conquest and strategic restructuring, but also of brutality and death. It is a must-see series that gives a remarkable insight into the reign of one of the greatest medieval kings. And you too can follow this historic journey with History Hit's exclusive offer available to fans of HistoryMarche. Click the link below to visit History Hit and use the code HistoryMarche when you sign up to get 50% off your next 3 months. Go where history is made with History Hit. In the wake of the death of Emperor Leo VI, his son Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus was still a juvenile, so his uncle Alexander Porphyrogenitus took control of the empire. As soon as he came to power, Alexander imprisoned his dead brother's wife, Empress Zoe, in a monastery. He replaced all of Leo's faithful associates with his own people and decided to stop paying the annual tribute to the Bulgarians. This gave Simeon I, probably the greatest Bulgarian medieval ruler, the pretext he needed to satisfy his great ambitions. On a moment's notice, he readied his army to advance on Constantinople. Meanwhile, Emperor Alexander suddenly passed away in June of 913. Now, the problems of the Eastern Roman Empire fell on the shoulders of the juvenile Emperor Constantine VII and the new regency headed by Patriarch Nicholas I Mystikos. Simeon I soon invaded the Byzantine lands, and advancing through Thrace, he reached the imperial capital without much resistance. As a man who spent most of his life in Constantinople, Simeon admired the Byzantine capital and its city culture, and he did not come just to plunder. His goal was nothing less than to sit on the throne as the Emperor of the Bulgarians and the Romans. However, the Theodosian walls thwarted his ambition, but Simeon's presence forced the Byzantines to negotiate and recognize him as the Emperor of the Bulgarians, an equal to Emperor Constantine VII. In addition, the young Constantine was to marry Simeon's daughter. As the father-in-law of the Byzantine Emperor and the one with real power at his disposal, Simeon hoped he would de facto control the entire Eastern Roman Empire. Satisfied, Simeon turned his army and marched back to Bulgaria. But, shortly after his return, news came from Constantinople. Constantine's mother Zoe took power as the boy's regent, nullifying the agreed marriage between her son and Simeon's daughter. In addition, she declared Simeon's coronation illegal. The response to this was another Bulgarian incursion into Thrace. In the summer of 914, Simeon advanced on Adrianople, and after a long siege, he bribed the city officials to open the gates. Further afield, areas around Doris and Thessaloniki were looted and burned, and Simeon called on the Romans in Constantinople to accept him as their emperor. But again, the walls of Constantinople prevented Simeon from dealing a final blow to Byzantium. During that time, the Romans launched a major diplomatic campaign against Bulgaria. Empress Zoe struck a peace agreement with the Arabs in the east and began peace negotiations with the Principality of Serbia in the west. The Serbian prince Peter Gojniković met with the strategos of Doris to discuss a potential alliance, but Simeon found out about these negotiations, so the Serbs quickly withdrew from this coalition. A Byzantine attempt to involve the Hungarians in this war was also unsuccessful, but with their rich gifts and gold, they managed to find an ally in the Pechenegs, a warrior nomadic people who often fought as mercenaries in foreign armies. After extensive preparations, in the summer of 917, the Romans raised an army strong enough to deal with the Bulgarian emperor. At the head of the ground forces was Leo Phocas the Elder, while the fleet was commanded by Romanus I Lecapinus. From Constantinople, Leo Phocas launched an attack from the south, marching his army into Bulgarian territory, planning to merge with his fleet and the rest of the army near Mesembria and Acheloos. On the other hand, the fleet, besides the task of transporting Byzantine troops, also had the task of transporting the Pecheneg army across the Danube, from where they would invade Bulgaria from the north. After a long march through Thrace, Leo Phocas reached Acheloos on August 20th, 917, and stopped to set up camp and rest his troops, before continuing to Mesembria to meet the rest of his army. But then, north of their position on higher ground, Bulgarians were sighted, organizing their formations and preparing for battle. Leo Phocas wasted no time and immediately prepared his troops. Seeing that his army was slightly larger, he decided on an offensive. Although sources vary on the size of the two armies, modern historiography puts the number of Byzantine forces to around 20,000 and about 15,000 Bulgarians. The Byzantines traditionally positioned the infantry in the center, with cavalry on the wings. The Bulgarians arrayed their troops in a similar formation. After a short wait, the Byzantine army launched a direct attack on the Bulgarian center and both wings. At the head of this charge was Leo Phocas, willing to fight side by side with his men. Thus began a hard battle. From the very beginning, the numerical advantage of the Byzantines came to the fore. Step by step, they gradually advanced, suppressing the Bulgarian army, which was slowly retreating under their attack. The greatest progress was on the right wing, where the Byzantine forces inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. Then, the entire Bulgarian left wing collapsed and began retreating, with Byzantines in pursuit. The rout resulted in massive casualties. The Bulgarians were defeated. Byzantine chronicler Ioannis Skylitzis states that a very interesting detail happened immediately after this retreat. Allegedly, Leophocus dismounted his horse in the middle of the battlefield to refresh himself with water from a nearby stream. But at that moment, his horse broke free and started running around the battlefield. Since the Byzantine troops knew his horse well, seeing it on the field without its rider, everyone thought that their commander had died. Panic broke out, and the Byzantine troops fled the field. This account by Ioannis Skylitzis, however, is rather unconvincing, as it is unlikely that a horse trained for battle would run away from its rider. In reality, the retreat of the Bulgarian left was likely an organized withdrawal, carried out to overextend the Byzantine ranks, and then go on a counter-offensive. As Simeon's troops reformed to push back the enemy, the battle entered its bloodiest stage. But now it was the Bulgarians that had the initiative, putting the Romans on the back foot. However, this was not the last trap set by Simeon. From a nearby hill, he closely observed the battle, and seeing that now was the right time, he moved his hidden cavalry to deal a final blow to the Roman army. His mounted units rushed down the hill and struck the unprotected flank of the Byzantine left wing. With this attack, Leophocus's line began to bend, until both the left wing and center formations completely collapsed. A rout ensued, and the Byzantines desperately tried to escape across the Acheloos river, because the Bulgarian cavalry had cut off their retreat towards the port of Acheloos. The muddy and swampy terrain in the river valley slowed down the Byzantine retreat, and many drowned in the river. Leophocus managed to save himself and reached Mesembria, from where he boarded a ship, and with the fleet that was late for the battle, he headed back to Constantinople. The exact casualties are unknown, but it is clear that the Bulgarians suffered heavy casualties, while the Byzantine losses were catastrophic. After the battle, it came to light that the planned Pecheneг attack on Bulgaria never took place. The reason for this was a quarrel between the Roman fleet and the Pechenegs, but there was also a misunderstanding among the Byzantine high command. Soon, the fleet with the rest of the army headed back to Constantinople and gave up on the campaign. However, Simeon decided to exploit the victory at Acheloos. He left one part of the army in the north in case of a Pecheneг invasion, and set off with the rest to the Byzantine capital. Arriving at Constantinople, Leophocus again led the army to stop Simeon, but he was again defeated, this time in the Battle of Katasirte. But once again, the walls of Constantinople were an obstacle for the Bulgarian army. Conquering this fortification, especially without a strong fleet, was unthinkable even for a leader as capable as Simeon. He negotiated with the Fatimids, counting on their fleet to blockade Constantinople, but the Byzantine diplomatic action and bribery prevented the formation of this coalition. Nevertheless, Simeon conquered vast Byzantine territories, reaching the Gulf of Corinth in the south. In the west, he invaded Serbia, overthrowing the Serbian prince Peter and appointing a Bulgarian puppet, Pavle Branović. Although he failed to satisfy his ambitions of becoming emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, after the Battle of Achelos, Simeon became the absolute master of the Balkans. This victory over Byzantium in 917 became one of the most famous and important battles of Bulgarian medieval history. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching, and if you'd like to support our work like all these amazing people do, head over to our Patreon page where you can get ad-free early access to our videos for as little as $1. Or you can support us by subscribing to our channel and leaving a comment as a sacrifice to the algorithm. As always, we'll see you in the next one.